So this is a story from October 2022, when I'd gone back to Kharkiv again with Pen Ukraine in their philosopher's bus. Serhiy Zhadan and Sviatoslav Vakarchuk were on stage, two rock stars talking about philosophy and war. Natasha whispered Russian translation into my ear. Both these guys could sell out stadiums, but here they were in this crowded basement, talking earnestly about the future of Ukraine to a few hundred people. Vakarchuk, a former deputy in the parliament and a well-known celebrity, had shown up in Kharkiv a few days into the full-scale invasion, Zhadan was saying, when things were impossibly dangerous. He'd brought an armoured car with him. This guy gets Kharkiv, was the message, and Vakarchuk nodded, pleased. The series of concerts and discussions was called Fifth Kharkiv, a phrase of the scholar Yuri Shevelyov, born 1908, who had lived nearby. He'd written about his city's past and present, its transformations, its identity as a Ukrainian city so often repressed, then rediscovered in the 1920s. It seems to me this is exactly what's happening right now, said Zhadan. He himself was a renowned poet and novelist, deeply involved in Ukraine's literary scene. Despite the shelling and the danger, they were still gathering together to debate the values on which this future was being built, and building on the foundations of Kharkiv's Ukrainian past. This is the Kharkiv phenomenon, the poet said. Despite the war, continuing with cultural life, with the intellectual life of the country, it seems to me this is terribly important. They talked back and forth for an hour or so on how to live in the present, or how to remember to live at all, when all day and every day you felt you should be volunteering, working, fighting for victory, for a future, and how history would judge it all. We can maybe have an objective assessment in 100 or 200 years, Vakarchuk said, but we're kind of live on air now, you know? We're making history. We have our Cromwells, our Churchills, our Oscar Wildes, all on the move together. It was getting late, and I was starting to sag, adrenaline all fizzled out. But when Vakarchuk began to sing, I felt a jolt of recognition. Kochania, Kochania. It was the same song I'd heard in the bunker a few months earlier. Love, love, Vakarchuk sang to the hushed room. From evening to morning, just as the sun sets, just as the sun sets, love disappears. His voice, rising in ad-libbed grace notes, then sinking back to the wistful melody, was so haunting, rough with emotion, then soft as a lullaby. It rose and fell, and the people standing in that packed space, some murmuring along, seemed to rise and fall with it, until the performer drew out the last line into a fluid improvisation of dark, minor notes, like a jazz singer in some smoky club. So Night Train to Odesa is an account of my time in Ukraine, although it actually begins in Russia. I was living in Moscow on a fellowship when the full-scale invasion happened. I left very quickly, obviously, and went on to Romania to report on the border. And then I spent several months in Ukraine on and off throughout 2022 and 23. I was reporting, and so the book is based on the reporting that I did. I was doing a lot of in-depth features and interviews, as well as a lot of radio stuff. But partly I wrote the book because I had so much material, I had so much more detail, and I really wanted to bring readers along with me. I want them to feel like they're there with me. Because the way that I was travelling, I was alone, usually sort of rucksack on the night train or cadging lifts with people and kind of going with the flow. It meant that I could soak up so much. I could meet so many people and really see the country. And partly I want people to understand as well just how beautiful Ukraine is. I want them to be in Odesa with me, you know, in those early days of the war, or in Kharkiv, or in Donbass, driving through that beautiful landscape and meeting all these extraordinary people. And I just want to bring people along with me. And also hopefully that they can understand the conflicts, this war, because it is simple in one sense. It's very simple. It's democracy versus fascism. It's about freedom and brutality. But there is a complex history, and I didn't want to lecture people about that, but I wanted to explain it, kind of show, don't tell. So explain through anecdote, through stories and people and places. I think I write what I want to read myself, and I'm very visual. So I find it hard. I struggle with quite dry text or academic texts. I need to drag people into the scene and make them feel like they're there. And so I write very visually, and I've always enjoyed that kind of reporting particularly. So I loved Martha Gellhorn's reporting, especially in the Second World War, and John Steinbeck's. That was a huge inspiration, partly because of their beautiful writing and Martha Gellhorn's sheer determination, because remember, women couldn't, at the beginning of the Second World War, they weren't allowed to be war correspondents. But also the way they wrote without judgment about other people. I really admired that, and I wanted to write like that as well. I've travelled so much doing book talks and going to book festivals and meeting people, and that's obviously been a huge highlight. The reception's been incredible. But personally, one of the most exciting things, as a very devout Radio 4 listener, I was in my kitchen and the continuity presenter Neil Nunes says, "And now Jen Stout with Night Train to Odesa," and that was, I just nearly fell off my stool. That was incredible. The book I'm currently reading is my favourite so far of this year. It's Jenny Erpenbeck's book Kairos, and it's a novel about a young woman in a relationship with a much older man. And it's also about the final days of the GDR, which I have a big interest in. And it weaves this together, this personal experience, lives coming together and falling apart with the bigger context around them. And it's very gripping.